Sleep Boxing Repeat. We are here to review the amazing fight between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder in the early hours of this morning, in which Tyson Fury was victorious for the second time in their trilogy. I'm here with Neil. Neil, how are you?
Yeah, very good. Very good after last night as well. What a night, what a fight. 5 knockdowns, heart, will, skill, determination from both guys. So as a boxing fan, you can't really ask for much more than that.
Unreal. Yeah. If you were to, in a nutshell, sum it up to someone who hadn't seen the fight yet, who wasn't going to watch it but wanted to hear about it, what would you kind of say rather than a breakdown? Was there, like, can you just talk me through like your set of emotions as you saw the fight? Was there a part when you thought Wilder's going to win this, Wilder's going to pull this off? Did you think Fury was going to win the whole time? Talk me through kind of your emotions as the fight went on.
Well, for someone who hadn't seen it, I mean, they say part of the test in boxing is skill and strategy, and the other test is a test of your character and will, and that's exactly what we saw from both guys last night. Wilder was knocked down twice before the finish. In the 4th round, Fury was knocked down twice. In the penultimate round, Wilder got knocked down. He had nothing left, but somehow in the final 10 seconds was throwing bombs, and it was on a knife edge the whole fight. You just never knew what was going to be happening. Wilder came out reasonably disciplined in the first 2 rounds. Then he got tagged a couple of times, the red mist came down, and then we just had a war for the rest of the fight. It became a bit more one-sided as the fight went on, but you never knew what was going to happen because, when you saw Fury get dropped twice in the 4th round, you knew anything could happen. And he was still getting hit clean after the 4th round, nowhere near as hard, but you just never knew what was going to happen and until the fight was waved off at the end. So just enthralling from start to finish.
Yeah, man, an action-packed fight, that's for sure, and one kind of worth staying up for. I think one thing about boxing is that you get a lot of boring fights, and Fury's had some boring fights in his career, but this definitely wasn't one of them. Just kind of want to look forward now, Neil, and say, I know it's a tough question, and I know there's so many things that could happen now. But I'll start with Wilder. Do you think this is the end? Do you think he'll retire, or do you think he'll fight on and fight the likes of Joshua, Andy Ruiz, Dillian White? What do you see? I'm thinking he's 35 now, 2 losses in a row, 2 stoppage losses in a row. What do you see happening?
Well, one thing we've learned about Wilder in this trilogy, and especially in the last 2 fights, is the size of his heart. We all knew he was a massive puncher beforehand, but just the sheer heart of him to just keep getting up and keep trying. If in the heavyweight, well, in any division, but especially in the heavyweight division, if you've got a decent punch and a lot of heart, that can take you a long way. He's also faced the number 1 heavyweight and lost to him basically 3 times, but officially twice. So in a sense, it's possible that's going to be his hardest fight. And that's done now. You can look forward. I don't think there's anyone else in the heavyweight division that's 6'9". Fury's a very, very special fighter. A lot of the other guys out there, I would say it's a 50-50 fight. I think right now he should probably just sit back and just wait to see what happens with the other fights. We're going to have, Eddie Hearn last night said Usyk Joshua rematch is penciled in for March. If I was him, I'd wait and see what happens there, because if Joshua loses again, I think Joshua Wilder is a great match and we can finally get it. Also, the pressure for both men is completely different now. It's still going to be there because whoever loses that one, you know, some people might, you know, wrongly say, well, oh, I guess they weren't that good, which would be untrue. But you know, that's a great 50-50 fight in my opinion. So if I was him, I would just wait and see what happens with the other heavyweights. We've also got White, Wallen. You know, these are all winnable fights for him. When this third fight was made, I wasn't the happiest about it, obviously, because it meant the collapse of Joshua Fury, which everybody wanted to see. But I'm, you know, after watching last night, I'm so glad it did happen, because what a night boxing fans got. But in saying that, I'm also glad it's over. It's decisive now. We don't need to see it again. And the good news for Wilder is, you know, it's over. He can now look to far easier opponents than Fury. And also, I really hope the people around Wilder can help him, firstly, accept this loss, and secondly, deal with the loss, because he's been through 2 wars now. You know, the first fight, he didn't really take a huge amount of damage, but only he and his team know how much that took out of him. He definitely won't be the same, but you know, I think he's probably got a lot left looking from the outside in, and you know, there's probably a little too much emphasis placed on losses. Everyone's going to lose at some point. You know, Fury's still undefeated, but if he carried on going, the losses would eventually come. You know, if that cut in the Wallen fight had got worse, that could have been a loss. If he somehow didn't resurrect in the 12th round, that could have been a loss in the first fight. There's no shame in losing at the top level. There's certainly no shame to losing to the number 1 heavyweight twice. So, you know, he shouldn't feel like a loser. It's gonna, you know, it'll be hard for him to come out second best because he wanted it so much. But at the end of the day, he's competing at a level that 0.01% of people will ever get to. Very few people on this earth will experience the pressure that he has to go through at that level. So, you know, he's cut from a different cloth, like the majority of people walking around, and he should just remember that, not think of himself as a loser, because at the end of the day, he's doing something a lot of people can't do.
Yeah, no, really, really insightful stuff there, Neil. I think his reputation's been enhanced now, and I think that there is definitely the demand for the fights that you mentioned. So on a personal note, I hope he doesn't retire, because Wilder, look, he's fucking exciting, right? He's not he's not a technically gifted fighter, but he's exciting. I'll tune in to watch him fight again for sure. Against
anything.
Yeah. So I hope he doesn't, because as you said, he's you know, to be 43, 44 fights in and to only lost to one person is impressive, even though a lot of his opponents are maybe subpar. And yeah, I just think saying, right, I can beat Joshua, Usyk, White, anyone else. There's just one person who I can't beat. It's not the worst thing in the world, but we'll see. It's going to be, if he does come back, I think, you know, obviously it'll be a little while. On the flip side, want to ask you, what do you think's next for Fury? It looks like everyone's talking about the Dillian White fight now. One thing I would say is that after the whole Joshua Fury fiasco, it's not guaranteed until Fury and White are in the ring in 6 months' time, whenever that is. White has a fight in a couple of weeks' time against Otto Wallin. But yeah, what I'm trying to say to you is, do you think that's the most likely fight next for Fury? Do you think we're going to see that next year?
I think White definitely deserves it. You know, he's something like 1,200 days mandatory contender. Not quite, because he had that loss to Povetkin, but you know, he beat him in a rematch. I've not looked at the figures, but surely that's got to be up there with the you know, the record for the longest running time to be a number 1 contender. So he absolutely deserves it. It's only fair he gets his shot. Right now, I don't really think there's anyone who competes with Fury. So in that sense, it's not like I'm dying to see Fury with anyone in particular. I'd still like to see the Joshua fight at some point, but it's very hard to think about when that could happen. And there's the White fight would make more sense before the Joshua fight. So yeah, I can't wait to see Fury again. But when he beat Klitschko back in 2015, I think he said he'd climbed his Everest, and what else was there for him to do? I hope he doesn't feel that way now, because he's just had one of the most, what probably will be a memorable trilogy in boxing history. It's probably be up there with, it'll at least be in the conversation when people talk about Fraser Ali, Holyfield Bowe. Those trilogies were far more evenly matched. And you can say the first fight was largely Fury dominating the rounds. The second fight was, I don't think many people gave Wilder many rounds, if any rounds. The third fight was really the only one that was a bit more back and forth. But just of how exciting every single one was in a different way, I think in time that will be remembered as one of the greatest trilogies.
Yeah,
and the personalities as well, and all the backstory with Fury making arguably the greatest comeback in boxing stroke sport in history, to even to be in the ring after almost 3 years out, it is one thing in itself. Then you've got Wilder, this charismatic American who can't accept a loss after the second fight. Guys that were friends in 2018 now, bitter rivals. So there's a lot of narrative there. So I think in kind of boxing folklore, that will be something people talk about for a long time.
Yeah, no, completely agree, mate. I think I think the build up to each fight was pretty legendary, and each fight was individually different in itself, whether they were competitive or not. Cool. I think that was mostly it, mate. I think the final thing that I just want to touch on, going back to the fight, as we mentioned, I feel like Wilder, look, it was a more competitive fight than the second fight. Obviously scored 2 knockdowns in the second fight. Just got beaten up for 7 rounds, let's be honest. Is there anything you think he could have done differently or done better at all last night that you think would have resulted in him actually winning the fight? Is there anything that you look at and think, he did well there, but he didn't quite do enough? Could he have done this earlier on? If there was a fourth fight, which I don't think there will be, what could kind of his strategy be to finally get that W over Fury? What are your thoughts on that?
Ultimately, I don't think he can beat Fury. Some people have your number. There are certain things you just can't do. Be like, if I applied for a job at NASA, I'd get rejected. If I applied again the next year, I'd probably get rejected. I'm just not that guy. We keep saying Wilder has the punch to knock out anyone. That's true. He very nearly did it in the 4th round last night. But Fury's just a completely different animal. He took his best Sunday punch in the 12th round of the first fight and rose and ended up winning the rest of the round. Last night he took it, and in the 5th round, it was Wilder that was the guy that was holding on. Fury just, a lot of boxers talk about adversity because it sounds good. People want to hear, yeah, you come through adversity and you get better. But Fury actually does it. He's one of the best guys at adapting in fights. And if you can do that, you're always going to reign supreme. So I think Wilder, he started well. And I was, as going in as a Fury fan, I thought, he looks good. There was a no nonsense ring entrance. He just walked straight to the ring, costume off, ready to go. Target the body really well, beautiful straight jabs followed by rights, and only sticking to the body. And the whole time I'm just thinking, well, the right upstairs is coming at any point. So, and Fury wasn't really throwing a huge amount either. But he did get tagged at the end of the first round, and you could kind of sense during the second round his discipline and focus had shifted slightly, but he was still thinking in there. But I think after round 4, after he'd had that success, he was so close to winning it in the 4th. I think he'd kind of abandoned tactics at that point. And I think there's nothing wrong with it. That's just his character. He's a finisher. Finishing guys is what's got him as far as he has. It's far, far too late in the day for him to become, a sophisticated boxer. It's just not going to happen. But he'll always be athletic. He'll always have that punch, and he'll always have that heart. He never stopped trying last night, and that's what he's got to do. In the same way that Joshua made the wrong tactics against Usyk. He was the bigger man. He never really cut the ring off. Joshua all he really needed was a jab and a 1-2 and cut off the ring, because those tools would at least get him started for him to land, his that signature huge uppercut he's got, and then his hooks behind that. And he chose not to do it. Wilder, he had decent tactics early on, but then he just went back to his big punch. But with a guy like Fury, who's bigger, far more experienced, not as many fights, but against better opposition, it's just not going to happen.
Not going to happen. Fair play. All right. No, I'm just going to round this off by throwing 2 questions at you. 2 quick fire predictions. Do you think on his day Wilder can beat any other heavyweight in the world, excluding Tyson Fury? Do you think on his day he could beat Joshua, Usyk, White, any of the other guys? I'm not saying does he definitely beat them? Does he beat them 7 days a week? But on his day, could you see him beating those guys individually, which of course would make him the second best heavyweight in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he'd probably have confidence in the first 2 or 3 rounds, because he's not up against a 6'9" giant anymore. He'd be closing the distance. Fury said Wilder is one of the best guys at closing the gap fast, landing big punches behind it. He'd probably have more success. He'd also, in my mind, if you put any other heavyweight in that fight last night in that 4th round, how many guys would, 1, get up from those knockdowns, or 2, not be stopped in the 5th or the 6th? That would usually be the end of it. But like we've been talking about, Fury's just truly special. He refuses to lose time and time again. I think Joshua, White don't have the same chin as Fury does. So I think he'd gain confidence because he'd see them far more hurt early.
Yeah.
And on paper he might not have the same skill set as them, but that equalizer punch will put him in good stead, in my opinion, against the majority of the rest of the heavyweight division. Even if you compiled a list of the greatest 200 heavyweight boxers, past and present, Wilder would be nowhere near that list in terms of skill. But that punch would never make me think he has no chance. He's always got a shot.
Yeah, big time. And final question. I feel like I shouldn't ask this because White's got a tough fight in a couple of weeks, but I'm going to ask anyway. Tyson Fury, Dillian White next year. Can I get an early prediction from you? Does Fury win? Does he win by KO? Do you think he wins on points? what would your official prediction be at this stage? You're allowed to change it when the fight gets announced if it does, but what's your prediction at this stage?
Well, it would definitely be a Fury win, because in my mind, nobody beats Fury. The only thing that would beat Fury would be if his motivation level dropped and he wasn't as excited about it, as as determined as he was against Wilder last night. If you saw his eyes just before the fight, that was a man possessed.
Yeah.
The way it would end, who knows? I mean, he's got a great team. He's great at putting a game plan together tactically. I think what would be interesting for me is, will he continue this run of going for the knockout? Because this wasn't really his style for the majority of his career.
Yeah.
And it's extremely exciting to watch. So I really hope he continues it. If the Fury we've seen in his last two fights, if he continues to be that kind of fighter, then I'd have to go with a knockout, probably, middle to late rounds, anywhere between 7 and 10.
Yeah. Okay. No, I appreciate the prediction. This stage, Neil, I think a lot of people would still be sitting on the fence. So appreciate you calling it. Yeah, and that kind of that rounds up our Fury Wilder 3 review. And I'm sure we'll discuss the third fight in future videos, but that sums it up. Neil, thank you very much for joining me this Sunday afternoon. I'm sure we're both pretty tired, pretty exhausted, but yeah, thanks very much for joining me.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.